Hi, I'm Miss Fideli, and I'm going to talk to you about Chapter 10 of To Kill a Mockingbird. This is the chapter from where the book gets its title from. This chapter is all about actually shooting and the rifles and the lessons that Scout and Jim learn about what is acceptable to shoot and what is not. It is a metaphor for the entire book, and actually the Mockingbird is Tom Robinson, and so you'll find out after the chapter and of course after the book, but I wanted to give you a little preview as we talked about it. So first off, the chapter starts with Scout talking about their dad, and they talk about how he's old. He's almost 50 and he has children, and so all of their friends and classmates' fathers are much younger, and they do things like hunt and fish and play football and catch, and Atticus is too tired for those things. Atticus mostly works in an office, and he reads, and he does things that the kids kind of deem as boring or not too interesting. So they're kind of ashamed of their dad, and Atticus is very humble in his talents and doesn't really share them with the kids. And so Scout and Jim are talking to Miss Maudie, and Miss Maudie goes, actually, Atticus has a lot of talents. He can play a Jew's harp. He can do all of this. He is really good at a lot of things. And so Atticus got them air rifles for Christmas, and Uncle Jack taught them how to use them. But he tells them that he'd rather that they shot at tin cans, but if they're going to shoot for birds, he says, shoot all the blue jays that you want, right? He tells them it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because they don't harm anybody. They are nice birds. They create beautiful music. They're not a nuisance to your yard like blue jays are. So it's more acceptable to kill a blue jay than it is a mockingbird, because a mockingbird is completely innocent. And that's basically the metaphor of Tom Robinson, right? Tom Robinson is innocent, and it would be a sin to convict him of a crime he didn't commit. Anyway, they're going on and they're talking about the old neighborhood and how there's a lot of old people and they're boring. And so Miss Maudie says, I'm not in a wheelchair yet, and there's still a lot of life left in your father. And so they're having conversations about, what Atticus can do. And Miss Maudie also says that he's really good at making somebody's will airtight, and that he's the best checker player in the town. And so they are like, yeah, big whoop, right? Not too exciting. But then Atticus comes home, and the kids have their rifles, and Jim is aiming at Maudie's rear end, and he tells her to watch out. And eventually he says, don't ever let me catch you pointing a gun at anybody again. And of course they oblige. And then Scout goes and interviews Calpurnia, and she says, what can my dad do? And she says, Mr. Finch can do a lot of things, but she didn't really have any examples. And so Scout continues to go on, and one weekend afternoon, Jim and Scout decide to go exploring with their air rifles, and they couldn't find any rabbits or squirrels. And so rabbits and squirrels are okay to shoot because you can eat them, right? It's the Great Depression, food, so that's completely acceptable, but they didn't find any. Instead, they saw a dog down yonder, down the street, and it's kind of like moseying around and acting funny, and they find out that his name is Tim Johnson. But they don't really understand what's wrong with him. They can tell that he's sick, and so Jim says he's going to go ahead and tell Calpurnia, and so that she can take care of the sick dog. So first things first, she finally believes him after she gets a look at the dog, and she calls up Atticus on the phone, and she tells him what's going on, that there's a dog coming down the street and that they need to warn the neighbors. And then she phones the operator, Eula May, and asks her to start calling all the neighbors to warn them to get inside and lock their doors because there's a dog that has rabies coming down the street. And so Atticus pulls up with Sheriff Heck Tate, and they get out of the car together, and Atticus tells Scout and Jim to stay inside, and they get out, and Heck Tate has a gun, and they locate the dog, and he's about to shoot, and they see that he can't even stay in a straight line or in the road. And so Jim says he's looking for a place to die. And then actually Mr. Tate says, no, he's far from it. He has a long ways to go. And then Atticus tells Heck Tate, the sheriff, that he's within range and to take the shot. And then the sheriff asks Atticus if he'll take the shot. And Atticus says, I haven't touched a gun in 30 years. And so he says, do it. You're the best shot. I trust you. And so Jim nearly faints and falls over when he sees that his dad grabs the gun, and he gets ready to point it, and he shoots the dog, and the dog falls limp, and everything is okay. And he Hecate tells him that he was a little to the right, and Atticus says, I always was. And then Miss Maudie says, I bet you're not so ashamed of your dad now. I forgot to tell you that your dad was the best shot in his time. And so then Jim is speechless, and Scout says she's no longer ashamed, and Atticus goes back to work. So that's how the chapter ends. The kids are ashamed of their dad, and they think that he's lame and boring, and by the end of the chapter, they are impressed with him, and they learned a lesson about their father.